Hey everybody, this is a tutorial for the trigger volume and the switch volume, which will be under the tools folder. So they are not 100% complete, but they are pretty close. They're definitely workable, and if hopefully when it's 100% complete, it won't screw with anything that you guys have already completed. But this is supposed to be a tool that helps you guys assemble puzzles or any events that you want to put together. Since Unity doesn't really have anything where you can just throw in a trigger box and just kind of put it together. So I've already assembled a little bit of that already. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off the player here and hit play to show you. So the switches have 3 modes. The first mode is test click, which basically allows you to click on the actual switch itself to activate the puzzle or whatever it is that you want to activate to see if it's working the way that you assembled it. The other mode is trigger mode, which basically looks in for the player to actually cross the trigger. And then the third mode is the player actually being facing the button and pressing the action button to actually activate that switch. So as an example, I set up these cubes. Each one of these cubes has the exact same animation on it, and it's set up in a way. And I'll just run it for you real quick. But every single time you click it, it's gonna activate it, and it's only gonna move half of the total animation, and then it's gonna go sequentially to the next one because it's set up in the switch that way. Each time I click it, and then when I click it again, it's gonna cycle back through and do the same thing, but it's gonna do the other half of the animation. Now the actual script itself it's on cube. I mean, I should have named it switch or whatever, but it's on cube here. And it's the switch script, which I'll make nice and big here. So here are the values here. I hope you can see them. If not, I'll just name them off real quick. The top one is switch mode. And this is what allows you for like each time the player clicks that switch, or you click the switch, or they cross the trigger, it tells you what it's going to do. So in single mode is when it just does one at a time for each click. So this means the player would have to press it multiple times in order to do like the entire thing. The other mode, there's other modes here. So incremental is one click, and it will do all of them that are in this list. I'll go over this list in a minute, but you click it, and it should run through all of them. Let me go ahead and restart it because it's kind of in an interesting shot here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it to incremental, and then I'm going to click it. Now, I'm going to go over this in a minute again, but as you notice, I only clicked it once, and it did them all. So that's called one shot with no loop. So one shot basically means it's only going to do one part of the animation. It's not, if I were to put it on switchable, basically I use the word switchable as in on-off. So if they are in the on position, they moved up, they're now in the on position, switchable would go back and forth. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to just restart it again and show you. So if it's on, incremental, and then switchable, it will go to on, and then off, and then move to the next cube. And with incremental, I only have to click it once and it'll cycle through. So as you can see, it's going to go on and off all the way through. And then once it gets to the last one, it's done. Now if you want that to loop, you just go to loopable and then click on it, and it will continuously loop through the exact same sequence. Now this would actually be a pretty good use for making like obstacles. Like let's say there's a hallway and you have to like run through really quick, or like you have to run underneath each object before it smashes you or something like that. This would be a pretty good use for that. So there's loopable, and there's also reverse loop. So with reverse loop, it's basically going to loop, but instead of starting back at the beginning, it's going to go back in the opposite direction from what it started. So it's going to go back and forth continuously. And then here's the modes I was talking about. There's test, click, switch, and trigger volume. So test click is you literally click it on your mouse just to test it out. You can use this test scene if you want. The only requirements with test click, I believe, is that the object that you're clicking on with the mouse has to have a certain script on it, and it has to have a collider on it, just so that it can register that click. So I'm going to go over all of these things real quick just to show you, and I use just these cubes. If you click on the cube, they have, let's see here. Yeah, they have no scripts attached to them apparently. Oh, okay, no, I remember. It's the cube parent because I animated them in local space. So the cube parent, which is the one that holds the actual animator on it with the animations, which if you watched my animation tutorial, you should totally get and understand this. It has the switch items script on it. So switch items literally means like items that are activated using the switch. So they're switch items. There's no variables on it. If I go to the script just to show you what it looks like here, if it ever shows up, edit script. There we go. Of course, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, I guess, but all it does is it checks the value of the isOpen parameter. Once again, if you watched my animation tutorial, this kind of makes sense a little bit, but it checks what the value of the isOpen is. It true or false because it's a bool. If it's true, it switches it to false. If it's false, it switches it to true. So all it does is checks it and then goes to the opposite of what it is, and it'll just do that back and forth. So that's what the script does for the switch: is it turns it on or turns it off. So this switch that I'm using here, it's good for anything that is animated that is only one, or it's like, on or off. Like, is the light on or is the light off? Is the object up or is the object down? Now, the only requirement is that the animation parameter is always isOpen. Now, I'm going to try and implement with the switch an integer parameter, and I'm just going to show you kind of what I'm talking about with that one here. I'm going to open up the animator. So it's the isOpen. This is just the starting. I mean, it's just on the ground. It has 0 animation. All it does is store that original position. It just stays there until it's ever turned on. And then so when it's turned on, it'll go to the cube animation here, which is the cube moving up. And then if it's turned off, it'll go to cube close, which is just this in reverse. With an integer parameter, you could actually implement a button, or an integer value. An integer is just a whole number, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So you could, I'll make another one, and it could be called, we'll just call it isOpen again. Or we'll call it like isSwitch. So just if you make an animation that has to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of sequence, like you have 5 different animations and you want it to play one and then the other and then the other and then the other, we'll make it isSwitch. And then kind of like the bool where it's on or off, you just make it 0, 1, 2, 3, however many you have. So basically for cube anim, you could turn this to 1 like that. And then for cube close, you could turn it back to 0, which is basically the same thing as what a bool is. But if you had like a third animation here that you wanted to go to, like maybe it moves up and then down and to the right and then back or something, you could do 0, 1, 2, and then back to 0, or 3 back to 0, depending on how many you have. And all you'd have to do to change that is you click on the transition, kind of like you did with the isOpen for the previous animation tutorial, and you will go to isSwitch, and then you'll say if it is equal to, so if it equals that particular value. So if it equals 1, for example, it will switch to the cube up part of the animation. And then if it were to equal 2, for example, and you would put 2 on this one here, you would go to isSwitch is equal to 2, for example, it would go to cube close, so on and so forth. But eventually, if you want the cube to return to its original position, you would want to set it to 0 and have a transition going from that last animation you have back to the original one. I'm just going to go back to the isOpen as it was before. So isOpen was false, and isOpen is true. So I'll be implementing that in the script. Just make sure it's isSwitch, and then you're going to want to always start at 0. 0 would also be like if you wanted to loop back to the original, you'd set it back to 0 and make a transition back there. And then you just increment for every single animation you want, and I'll throw that in there, and I'll even make it reversible as well, where it could start at 0 and it could go to the top number, so it could go to 4 and then 3, 2, 1 and then back to 0. So just like I showed you here with this animation here in the incremental, which means forward, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. But just like it's reverse loop, for example, in this case it would be like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it would go from 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 if you wanted it to go backwards. Anyways, that was kind of a little side trail that I went on there, but I will be implementing that. It'll give us a little bit more room to make more dynamic puzzles that aren't just necessarily on or off type of animations, because you never know, like one needs to open a door, another one needs to move a box, another one needs to make a trap swing open or something crazy like that, and all of those are one animation. You can't really say on or off. That's actually a sequence of events. So that's where we'll use that is switch to pass through that sequence of events based on things that you're clicking or pressing, objects you have, so on and so forth. For now, the puzzles are just going to be like you click a switch. Later on, if a key is required to actually open a door or whatever, I will throw that requirement here in the switch script. So when you apply the items down here, it'll have like a bool value with a key ID, for example, and it'll say yes, it requires a key, and the key has to have this ID. So when they pick up the key, the player will receive that ID, and then if they click the object and that ID is matched, it will open the locked door. That sounds kind of crazy right now and a little complicated, but we'll go over it when we get to that point. But for now, we just got to get these puzzles done. So we're just going to make them super simple, to the point, throw them in there, just have them working, even if there's no challenge to it, just clicking a switch, it starts it up, whatever. They'll be in there, and we can start playtesting, and we can start really seeing what we need for these puzzles. Anyways, to move on. So single is obviously a single basically means every time you click the switch, it will activate the next item in the list. And then incremental was, like, I could just show it again. Incremental is you click it once, and it will activate each item all the way through to the end, basically. I did put in there saying that you could only click it once. If it's incremental, you can only click it once, and if the player clicks the switch again, it won't do it again. Like, it'll play through the whole thing until they click, it's done, and then they could click it again, for example. So incremental does work with one shot too. It doesn't have to be up, on, and then off. It could just be on all the way through and then off all the way through. Or you could turn it into switchable, and you could say that it's going to go on and off all the way through. So on and then off, on and then off, on and then off, so on and so forth. There's also another one. It's called decremental, and all that is it goes the other direction from the start. So let's say you put all the items in there for incremental, and then you realized you accidentally put the items in there backwards, and it needs to run the other direction. Instead of reapplying all of them, you could just switch it to decremental, and it'll just move in the other direction. Basically, the difference between decremental and incremental is the direction you're starting from. So in incremental, you're going to start from the top of this list of items that you put in here, and it's going to move down. And in decremental, it's going to move from the it's going to move from the bottom of the list here and then go back. And it has all of the same things. It can loop. So in decremental loop, it'll start from the bottom of the list and go up, and then bottom of the list and go up. And you can also reverse loop, so it goes from the bottom of the list up and then from the top of the list down again. Looping forever. It'll loop forever. If you do want something in there where once it's activated, it runs a reverse loop once, I can throw that in there, because right now the reverse loop is in here, but it only just continuously repeats. So I could say something like, yes, do a reverse loop, but only loop 3 times, or yes, do a loop, but only do it 2 times, whatever it is that you need. For now, it's just going to loop forever, which hopefully won't be too much of a problem. As you can see, these are all the same cube with the same animation. That doesn't mean that you can't implement other things in the same list, which I will show you here in a minute. And I'll actually show you with this sphere here. Why not? It doesn't have it on there. It will have a switch. Now, if you can't find it in the assets, because there's a lot of scripts in here, you can just go ahead and type it in. Switch items. So it's a switch item script. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to make sure that it has the is open parameter. Hey, look, it doesn't have the animation. I think that's because I imported it from somewhere else, and now it's all screwed up. It's all screwed up. So if you didn't watch the animation tutorial, I'm actually going to run through it really quick. So here's a sphere. It has an animator on it. Doesn't have any animations. Went to this animation thing. I'm going to add a curve. I'm going to call it the sphere, whatever, it doesn't matter. Actually, sphere rotate. And I'm going to save it under black placeholders and save it. So now there's an animation called sphere rotate on it, and it has the animator controller on it, which holds all the animation clips for this sphere. I'm just going to run through this, nothing crazy or anything, but I'm going to grab the parent empty object, and I'm going to rotate the parent instead of the child. So for rotation, I'm just going to go ahead and put 1 so it queues it up, and I'll go back to 0. And then I'm going to move it for, let's say, a whole 1 second. And then I'm going to rotate it 359 degrees on the Y, so the animation will rotate around like that. And that's it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy paste the values, make a new animation. I'm going to call this sphere empty, which basically means there's no animation. It is animated, but the animation is just like that very initial position, so it loops through an animation where it's just sitting still, basically, like not animating at all. So I'm going to go back to placeholders. I'm just going to throw this in here. Done. Paste. Delete the end of the animation because I only need that first part of it. And then that is all the animation I need. Then I'm going to go to Animator. I'm going to make sphere empty the default because this will be the starting animation. So the starting animation is not animating. Then I'm going to make a transition, and then I'm going to make a empty one, which is going to be the reverse of sphere. Now, you don't have to do this for every single one of them. You don't necessarily need you don't necessarily need to always do, one way and then the other way. You can just do one way and then go back. That's fine too. I just doing it for the sake of this tutorial. Rotate reverse, I'm going to call it, because I'm not going to stop it. I'm just going to have it reverse. Okay, so it has no animation, so I'm going to give it that sphere, the sphere rotate, which is one direction, but I'm going to give it a negative speed so that it rotates the other direction. And then I'm going to make a transition to that one. In fact, I'm going to move it down here like that. And then this one can also go back to the other direction. It will never go back to stopping. Once it starts, it will always be rotating, but its rotation can be reversed. Not that. Okay, so I'm going to create a parameter, which is the isBool, or the isOpen bool. Is open. Make sure it's spelled just like that. Capital I, lowercase s, capital O, and then everything else is lowercase on there. And then I'm going to go here, say if isOpen is true, it will start rotating. If isOpen is false, it will start rotating the other direction. And then if it goes back to true, it will go back to its normal rotation. And that's it. So then I'll go back to the scene. I will click on the sphere parent, and it has switch items on there, so this should work. I'm going to go back to my switch here. I am going to go to the size of my list items. I'm going to make it the size of 6. Now there's a element 5 down here. By the way, lists always start with a 0. So 6, there are 6 in here, but 5 is the 6th one. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 5. When I open it up, it copied the previous one. It just does that by default. So I'm going to replace it with the sphere parent here, just like that. Group number, time, all that good stuff we'll go over in a minute. Item count, -1, that's fine. So I dropped it in there. Now it should activate last if I did this correctly. So it is on decremental, switchable, no loop. So it should do this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and then start rotating the... Nope, didn't work. It started rotating it right away. Very interesting. Why did it do that? Let's see here. Let's go incremental. Obviously it's going to start. Incremental. Haha, there we go. I was correct. It was on the bottom of the list. That's why it started first. See, I screwed it up because visually speaking, it looked like it should have went last. But technically speaking, it was the first one to start in a decremental loop. Now, if I click it again, that should deactivate it, or it should reverse looping, or the reverse rotate at the end. There it goes. Of course, it jumped because it's not perfect, and it is on off right now because it is switchable, so it's going to switch and then go back again. Now, if I turn it to one shot, it should reverse rotation and just keep that rotation once it's done there. So as you can see, you can do multiple animations. They don't have to be the same thing with this switch. So there, reverse rotation. I could go back as well. And that's just to show you that the cubes, that doesn't mean that all of the things have to be the same. It just means that they all have to be animated in a similar fashion like this. Anyways, moving on. I'm going to go ahead and take out the sphere. It's a little unnerving. Couple ways to delete it. I could either change this to 5 and it'll get rid of the last one in the list, or I can right click on the element and its number, and I could just delete it. And that is that. Now, I'm not sure why that didn't change. Let's go back to 5 like that. Start it up again, test it out. Look at that, it works just fine. That won't animate at all. That little cylinder actually spawns cylinders too, so that is another animation. Or actually, that's not even an animation. It's kind of confusing on that one. It just activates because the script doesn't just change the animation. Like right here, I said, hey, yeah, it changes the animation, but what it really does is it's calling this function, and the spawn object has the same. They're all basically children of the same script, and what happens is that parent's function gets called, which calls the child's function because it's named the same and it overrides it. It's programming. In any case, that's why scripts can be activated or animations can be activated just by throwing them in here. In any case, so to go through the other ones, now what I had stated here is I'll just start over. I'll just show you how to do this. So the list starts at 0. These are at whatever the default values are. Okay, what do I do now? So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 objects. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a 5 in the size. Now there's 5 none game objects in there. So all I got to do is I got to drag and drop the objects that I want. So this would be the first one to be activated in the list because it's at the 0 spot. And then the second one to be activated. And then the third one to be activated. And the fourth. And the fifth. So those are the 5 objects. Now if I were to go incremental, that means that this one's activated, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. If I go decremental, then it's going to be this one, this one, this one, this one, and then this one. But there's other ones too, and that's where the group number comes in. And oh yeah, so here's another one, time. So the way time works is it will animate this one, or sorry, it's going to wait a certain amount of time, and then it animates it. And then same for this one, it'll wait for that amount of time and then animate it. So you know that's the sequence. So like I'll show you real quick. I'll put 1 second for this one, 3 seconds for this one, 2 seconds for this one, 0.5 seconds for this one, and 1 second for that one. And now you're going to see what happens with the time. So it should be this one animates after 1 second, so on and so forth. So I'll click on it. Still on decremental, as you can see, it was, and now it waits and it goes. Here, let me go back to incremental so it looks a little bit, makes more sense. So it should be 1 second, then 3 seconds, then 2 seconds, then a half a second, then 1 second. So when I click it, it'll be 1 second, and then the next one starts, 3 seconds it waits, and then it goes to the next one, 2 seconds it waits, next one, half a second, and then the last one is 1 second. So basically what it's saying is that this one, the next one in the list, will start animating after this amount of time. The third one in the list will start animating after this amount of time. So it's the previous one in the list time that it waits for the next one to be activated. So the second one in the list will not be activated for 3 seconds after this one is activated. So I'll do it again. 1, 3, and then 2 is the next one, and then half a second, and then 1 second. So this last one was activated a half a second after this one was activated. And that's what the timer does. Now, the group numbers is for the one that's called multiple. Now, multiple works like single. For every click, it'll activate the next part of it. So for group number, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that this is group 0, this is group 0, this is group 1, this is group 1, and the last one will be group 2, just so that you can get a good visual. So these two should be activated together, and then these two will be activated together, and then the last one will be activated by itself because it's the only one in group 2. So when I click it, and it should be switchable, so it should go up and down. So these two go together. Okay, sorry. This one has not, I don't think has been implemented with the switchable one-shot thing yet. Click it again. Okay, yeah. It's on single. I'm not sure why it's not working like the previous single one, but this one's going to go to the on position and will not go to the off position until you click it again. So obviously the script, you know, it's not all the same for every single mode, and that's what is still going to work out. Maybe we like to keep it this way. We can keep it this way. That's fine. But anyways, as you can see, the groups are activated together. So group 0 goes, and then when I click it again, group 0 will go to off position, group 1 goes to the on, so on and so forth. And then if I make it one shot, it should stay up when I click. No, it didn't. See, so this, obviously it needs to be fixed. So in the case of one shot, what should happen is when I click it, it'll go to the on position. When I click it again, it should stay in the on position, and then the next one will go in the on position. But as you can see, they're moving in groups based on their group number. Now, there's also multiple incremental. Now remember, with incremental, you click it once, it should cycle through the whole thing. But it's going to cycle through the whole thing based on the time. So how it's going to work is from the top of the list down. It's going to use the time of the first object of that group from top to bottom. So these two will activate together because they're in group number 0. However, it's going to use the 1 second. It's not going to use the 3 seconds because it's going to go off of the first object's time. Just like the second group here, group 1 and 1, it's going to do 2 seconds, not half a second, because it's going to go off of the first object of that group from top to bottom. The second group's obviously going to use 1. It's the only one in that group. So if I do multiple incremental, we should see them work together, and after 1 second, the next group will go, and then after 2 seconds, the last one will go. So I'll click it once, and that's what should happen. Ta-da! Now let's say I switch the top one to 3. Now it should be 3 seconds before the next one is activated. And then 2 seconds, and then 1 second. Now notice if I change this other one to like 10, it's not going to make a difference because it's going to base it off of the first one. So just 3 seconds passed. So that's how a group's going to work. You throw in the group, any one of them after the first one, the time's not going to matter. You could have whatever value in there, no value, it doesn't matter. It's not going to do anything. It's going to go off of the first one in the group's value. That can be a little confusing. If it is, I could try to implement something that it makes a little more sense than that, but hopefully that makes enough sense. I mean, I don't know how many objects we're gonna be throwing in this list. I could see how it could be confusing if you want grouping like this, and the list is huge. You know, that could be an issue. I'm gonna go ahead and shorten the time of the first one. Now, this one should work the same way, other than this switchable thing, which I need to fix, but it should loop because it's on incremental, so it'll loop through by itself. So it'll run through once, and then it should go back to the beginning, so on and so forth. And then if I go to reverse loop, it should reverse loop, just like before, but with the groups. So you could have lights turn on, when a door opens, and a sound go off all at the same time. I haven't implemented sound in here, but I'm going to do that for you guys before I give this to you. And sound will be the same thing. It'll be I'll give you an object, a sound switch script. So there's going to be the switch item script. There's a light switch script, and then there'll be a sound switch script. So you'll throw in an audio sound. That sound will play if you put it in the switch list. You can have one thing in this list. I've tested it. It's fine. You could, if you just need the one item, that's cool. You just put one item in there, and that's the only item that'll be activated for that particular switch or trigger box or whatever, and you're good to go. So that's multiple incremental. I needed to get rid of number. It doesn't do anything. It was stupid. I was saying like, hey, you know, they could put in a certain number and that's the one that would go off. Like the first 3 would go off, but that's pretty much what multiple is. So there's no point of that. Multiple decremental, same thing. It's just going to go in reverse order. So it's going to start from the bottom of the list and go up. Not a big deal. And its loops work just fine as well. The only one I haven't gone over yet is all. All is pretty freaking straightforward. It activates them all. So if you want to throw all of them in the list and have them all activate when that switch is pressed, then boom, there you go. They all go off. Switchable does not work for this one yet. I think the only one that I actually fixed the switchable thing with was the single one, and I think that's why. Single and all are not loopable. If you want loopable all right now, you can just use multiple. So you can just go to multiple, set all of the group numbers to the same group, so just group 0. They will all go off, and it would be loopable with multiple incremental. So multiple incremental, they're all in the same group. It'll be based off of the top time, and it will loop. Ah, look, one of them is not in the same group. Yeah, it's pretty cool, though. Switching around. That last one, group 1, should be group 0. Okay, so they should all just go together. Not a big deal. I will throw loopable in all because that might be an option that's just easier to access with all. You don't have to do grouping. You just throw them in the list, click all, loopable, done. Hey, look, it's not looping. That's great. Well, it's supposed to be incremental and it's not looping back. Like I said, it's not 100%. It's pretty close. It's getting there. I'm going to show you the next part here. So that is the switch, and that switch script is actually just applied to this cube. That's it. And then right here I put it on test click so that I just click on it with the mouse. With the camera, I set up the camera so it's facing this object. I just click on it with the mouse and it does it. Normally in the game that's not what it's going to be. I just threw that in there so that you guys could test it without having to jump in the game all the time and run around and do all of that, just to test to see if the puzzle's animated the way you need it to animate. Obviously with animations, if you watch the other tutorial, you can turn off collision, turn on collision, change its color, all that crazy stuff in the animation. So that's the best way to do the puzzle, because you just set up the entire sequence of events that needs to happen for that puzzle whenever you click a switch. So the door needs to rotate open, and the light needs to like turn on and flicker or whatever, and then like the color needs to change, and the collision needs to be turned off or on so that they get killed or shot or whatever. That can all be done in animation. So moving on to the other one. So there is the switch volume and the trigger volume. So I've showed you guys the trigger volume, but I'm actually going to go over it. So here's my trigger volume. I just toss it from the tools into the scene. I'm going to go ahead and zero out its Y. It's in the ground. Let's see, what is its height? If you go to the box collider height and you do half of it, it should be, no, I guess not. It's going to be this times the scale, so 7.5, 776, sorry, 4. Oh, that's about right. It's almost there. I went half of the size of the collider times the scale, which is roughly 4.5, somewhere around there. Anyways, so here's your trigger volume. You can change its size by just changing the box collider size. So there's the X, the Y, and the Z. I'll just go back to normal. So you can make whatever size you want, place it wherever you want with that. It needs to stay as is trigger, because it is a trigger volume, so do not click that off, otherwise the player will collide with it and they won't be able to go into this empty space because there's an invisible wall. And it also won't activate anything that you apply on here. So there are 3 ways you can spawn things, because right now it is a spawning trigger volume. So the trigger volume is for spawning things. That's what it's there for, spawning objects, spawning bad guys. It should be called trigger spawn volume or spawn trigger volume or something like that, but I'm just going to call it the trigger volume for now because the other one is called the switch volume. So for the trigger volume, you can do all, which is basically bad guys and objects will be spawned. You can do AI, which basically means that only AI will spawn, and props is only objects will spawn. Now I have custom box color on. If I unclick that and I change this, the color of the box will be roughly kind of the danger level of the object. So with AI, it's red. That means bad guys. If you guys want to change this color, it's done in script, so it can't be changed. But if you want a custom color for a very specific trigger volume, so like this trigger volume here, this one specifically, it's not going to change the color of all the other ones you make unless you copy paste this one. It'll just change the color for this one, and if you want to do that, obviously you hit custom box color checkbox, and then you just change it to whatever color you want it, and it'll stay there even if you switch this. So if you do want your own color, that's fine. I think it's nice that I implemented this, then you know what kind of a trigger box this is. Bad guys, good guys, whatever. So you have bad guys, props, which is blues. Blues calm, nice things, whatever. And then you have all, which is kind of yellow because it's in between the bad guys and the objects. Good props, stuff like that. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say I'm not going to spawn the bad guys just because there's no nav mesh and it'll probably give me a bunch of errors. So let me just go with props for now. So for props, you have 2 lists. You have bad guys and you have OBJs. So OBJs are obviously props. So you'll open up this list and then you'll put in whatever objects you want. So there's 10 there, and then there's a spawn count, which is 10. So basically what it's saying here is it's going to spawn a box, and it's going to spawn 10 of them whenever the player walks through this here. Now I already implemented the player in here, and you'll have this as well right there. So the player can be used with the keyboard and mouse. When it walks through that object, hopefully, because I just threw this in here in this test scene, it will spawn 10 boxes when I walk through it. Now, you can't see it, so if you want to see it, all you need to do is make sure you click on Gizmos, and you will see the box. Because the box is invisible in the game, but there's actually a collider there. So if you click on Gizmos, it'll be there, and you can actually test it out by running through it. Boom, 10 boxes spawned. Yes, they have gravity applied, and there's no floor. The player lives by different rules. The player is a god, so it floats. Anyways, do it again, nothing. Does not spawn anymore. I'll show you why. So yes, I have the trigger volume here. I said I want to spawn 10 boxes. Now, I didn't show you this, but to apply the object, you just click on this little target here, and then you can search through the assets for whatever asset you want to spawn. Or the other way is to drag and drop something from the scene in there, and it'll spawn that object multiple times. Or you can go into the assets down here in this little area and drag and drop it there. I typically just click on the target, look for it, or I'll type it in. So if I needed to look for box and box wasn't on the top, I could just do that, and it would be right there. In fact, I'll show you. I'll just spawn these types of boxes, different type of box. Go in here. It should spawn a bunch of crate boxes that probably don't have gravity. Yeah, they don't have gravity. It did spawn 10. It just spawned them at the same spot. They have no collision or anything, so they just sit there and float in the air. The other box actually has collision on it and rigid bodies and all that good stuff, so they bounce off each other. That's why they flew around like that. I'll probably implement something. Each one of these will get like a spawn point or something, and you can drag and drop their spawn point around. So like each object would have an empty pivot thing, and you just move that pivot wherever you want it to spawn if you didn't want it to spawn in the game. But typically things that spawn should spawn from the sky, or they drop through a pipe or a tube or something like that. So typically if you're spawning an object, you're probably only spawning 1, 2, or 3 of them, and they're all coming from the same spot. The AI works the same way, but it just spawns a bad guy. But they have to be on a nav mesh. There is no nav mesh. It's going to give me errors, so I'm not going to do that right now. But it works. I've actually tested it. So for bad guys, all you do is click open the bad guys list, and you'll place the bad guys in there. So I already have bad guys in there by default. I'm going to go ahead and empty this out before I give it to you guys. Otherwise, there's going to be issues. Hit there. Okay. So trigger count is how many times can this thing be triggered. So obviously it was only once, spawned 10 boxes, it was done for, it can never be used again. If I say 3 times, however, in there, I'll go in here, and now I can trigger that box 3 times. So 1, 2, 3, and nothing else, because I only said 3. As you can see with the trigger count over here, it is now 0. If it's 0, it can't be, or sorry, if it's equal to 0, it cannot spawn anymore. So if you want infinite number of times it can be triggered, which I don't recommend, because if a player did that, they could crash the game. You make it -1, so it's less than 0, it's not equal to 0, it'll continue to count down and continue to spawn shit. So boom, boom, just repeatedly, there is no limit. Every single time I empty this box, it's going to spawn boxes. It's pretty awesome. As you can see, my camera script is being blocked by the trigger box. That's why it keeps zooming forward on its own, which I will be fixing, because we're going to use the new camera, which will never go outside of an object. It'll also check for trigger volume so it doesn't get blocked, because that trigger box there is an invisible wall that is blocking the camera's view from the player. See, just continuously, no big deal. Of course, there's nothing else in this scene, so it's not really a big deal, but if this were the game with the map and everything, this would be lagging out pretty badly. And that is the trigger volume. So it's going to be used for spawning stuff. Oh yeah. Cool. That was fun, spawning boxes. And that's the trigger volume. It's pretty straightforward. There's nothing, insane about it or anything. It's just a box. Place it in there, player crosses it, done. Now, if you have your own custom player, which I don't know why, because I'm going to give you this player and you get to use it, just make sure their tag is player, which comes in the Unity tags list by default, so you don't need to add it. It should be in there. Just drag and drop down, click it, and then it should work just fine, especially if you're using the first-person controller from the Unity standard assets, or even the third-person one. It should work, so long as their tag is player. Alright, so the next box, which takes a lot more setup than that box, is the switch volume, which is basically the same thing. It's a box, same size by default. You throw it in there. You can make it whatever size you want, whatever. Just make sure it's still trigger. Same thing as that other switch that was over there that we're activating these boxes. The only difference here is instead of it's actually on trigger volume by default. If it's not, just make sure it's on trigger volume. So trigger volume basically means it's going to do the same thing, but instead of clicking a switch, it's going to be you walking through a trigger volume that activates. There's a little activated bool in here. Don't worry about that. It shouldn't even be there. I'll be getting rid of that. So I want to make those 5 boxes move when I walk through that volume. So I'm going to go ahead and just, once again, like I showed you before, I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop these in here like this. There's another fast way of doing this, but it's not good, and I'll show you why in a minute. Because clicking and dragging just seems kind of crazy, like a lot of work, a lot of time. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and switch. Crap, I am looking on the wrong one. Switch volume. Sorry about that. Last one I missed here. Put it in there. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep it on switchable and incremental. And I'm going to give every single one of these guys 1 second in between each activation. Just keep item count at -1. I'm still working out how to just manage that. It's public right now just for testing, but like do not mess with it. Keep it -1. You'll see it change during testing and gameplay. That's fine. It should reset back to -1 when you jump back in. No loop, incremental, switchable, good to go. It's on trigger volume. I haven't tested this. Actually, I have tested it once, but I haven't tested it in here. So, when the player walks through this box, those cubes should activate. Boom, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? So, whenever the player runs through an area and you want lights to go goosh, goosh, goosh down the hallway, which I already implemented in the hospital, it looks pretty cool. The lights go out, spotlights go out down the hallway one at a time. It's pretty fucking creepy. It's pretty awesome. You can even have the sound go off when it does that, so it's it's pretty cool. Anyways. Look at there. I activated it again. There is no limit to how many times you can activate this, unlike the other one. This one can be activated whenever they walk through it. I could put, once again, like I told you before, like, right now, like the loop thing will continuously loop forever. I was talking about how, you can limit the number of times it loops. I will be throwing that in there for this one as well, so it should work. It's the same script, so I don't see any reason why. There you go. I walk through it and it activates it. I could even change it. So it's on incremental now. I could change it to single, switchable. So look at that. Oh, okay. There is a little weird issue where if the item count doesn't start at -1, which typically it's not at -1 when you switch it during gameplay, it will activate the first 2 by itself. However, if I go ahead and restart it, it's at -1, change it to single, no loop, all that good stuff. Then I will walk through it and it'll activate 1 box. And then I'll walk out of it, and I'll walk into it, and it activates the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So you get the picture here. Every single time I'll walk through this box, it will activate the next part of it. So that is how the switch volume works. So the same thing as a switch, but with volume. Everything else works the exact same way. I could change this to incremental reverse loop. So I go into the box and it's just going to run through the whole sequence, looping, and it should reverse. This would be great for traps. Traps are moving. Player walks into a room. Trap starts. You know what I mean? Pretty good stuff. And then the last part, which is player interaction. So I'll click on this and I'll change it from test click to switch. And now it should be activated by the player facing it and clicking the action button, which I may change. It's not working. Isn't that freaking fantastic? One other thing might have to be changed at that. I think it has to be on a switch tag. I'll try to figure out how to make it do that automatically so you don't have to set that. Nope. Interesting. Maybe I haven't implemented that part yet. It should be working though. Oh, there it goes. I was clicking the wrong button. That one was on all, I believe, or something like that. No, multiple incremental, but they're all in one group. So yeah, so I'm clicking it as the player. As you can see with the mouse, I click on it, it's not doing anything. If I were to change this to test click and click on it with the mouse, it would go off. See? Ta-da! But if I change it back to switch, then I click on it with the mouse, nothing happens. But as the player in game, how it's supposed to work, I would right click with the mouse and it would go off. I could even change it to incremental and no loop switchable, and I could click on it and it would just loop through it like that. Different timing though, remember? Here, let me put it on a loop. See if I can run under him without dying. Click on it. Run. Run. Of course, they have no collision on them, so it doesn't matter. I can just run straight through them anyways. But this is like an example of some kind of obstacle. And of course, those cubes would be way bigger. Nightmare world. Those could be, you know, giant anvils or pendulums or something. Anyways, so that is the trigger box, or the trigger volume, and the switch volume. I was working on a post-processing volume. They say it can't be done in Unity. I say it can be done because I get shit done. I am trying to figure out how to get that done, but I am pushing that until next quarter because it is game dressing, honestly. And if we can't get it done, I'm sure we could figure something else out, but I'm pretty sure I can get it done. I just don't want to waste any time on the art stuff when I could be working on gameplay stuff. Jump is sort of working. As you can see, they jumped, but if I jump again, she'll like... Okay, that hasn't happened in a long time. She jumped pretty high there. Jump once. Wow, okay. That's a new problem. So the first jump like looked, you know, choppy or not smooth, but it kind of worked, you know. Now, and now she's jumping really high. It's weird. I think it has something to do with the jump timers I have in there. But the other problem is having as I would jump, she jumped to the same height you saw on the first one, but she would have like she would sit there for like 2 seconds and then fall. Like it was weird. So obviously I had to work on that. I basically ended up compromising with just going with a really simple jump thing that I'm gonna make it like Mario style. You kind of go up slow, you come down really fast type of thing. And that should work. It just hasn't been like implemented because she can still walk around when she's jumping, which is kind of an issue. Oh, look at that. All sorts of interesting issues with the jump. And the biggest issues I'm having is with that little line that you see there. That's what allows her to like walk on the floor or on like mesh objects. Like she should stand on the cube when she comes back down if I am on top of it. No. On the cube. Nope. Missed it again. There, on the cube. That red line is basically just checks if there's a mesh under her and she'll jump on it. So like she can jump, yeah, there you go, see? She's laying right on the box. So she can like walk on boxes and stuff. Yeah, I'm down on it again. So I just gotta get the jump in there, because obviously with the puzzles we're gonna need jumping and other things with the different creatures and stuff. That's coming. I know it seems like such a small thing that should be easy for a programmer, but with mesh collision and everything, it's kind of being a pain, especially with the way I have the input controls working. But it will get done. The switch is pretty much done. The volume trigger is pretty much done. I am working on artificial intelligence today, so I'm going to work on a couple. I'm going to work on the patrolling one, because obviously we talked about that one in the Broken City, with the dogs that are patrolling back and forth, and as the rat, you have to sneak. So I will be implementing all of that. The dog will be patrolling. You can sneak around it. If you don't sneak around it, it will chase you. If you're the dog, it'll see you. All that stuff. Like if you're the rat, you sneak. If you're the dog, you don't. Does it see you when it's facing you? All that kind of stuff. So I will be implementing that today with the nav mesh in the Broken City. I hope you guys like it. I will be sending you a build. If you have any issues with this, yes, it's a long tutorial. I talk a lot. I like talking. But if you have any issues with this, just let me know. I will fix it. Please give me your input. What do you want to see in this right now? Because we only have like a week. I'm saying a week because we gotta show, you know, Bradley, like Christian Bradley, like what we have next week. So I want to show him something, you know. It's not the week 8 one, but like it's a pretty big one because it's like, wow, what have you guys been doing for the last 3 weeks? So like, let's get these puzzles done. Let's get these 2 levels done, guys. You know, but please, I need your input. Like, you know, I can sit here and program all day long, but like if I don't have a leash on me, I will end up programming and troubleshooting this one thing for hours, and like that whole day goes away just trying to get jump to work when like we haven't gotten other things to work that we want in there. So you need to tell me what you want in there, so I can like start, oh, you know, I need to troubleshoot jumping. Okay, well, screw jumping for now. Let's do the rat. You know what I mean? Let's do this, this, and this. we'll come back to jumping at the end. If the jumping doesn't work very well in the end, oh well, we got all this other stuff in there that does work, and it looks awesome. So please give me your feedback, what you want to see, what you want done. If it's art related, we'll just hold that off until next quarter. I can definitely do programming art stuff, but like, let's get the gameplay stuff done. Let's get the puzzles done. I'm really excited to see how this game plays, but we got to get it done. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I walked through it in depth enough. It looks pretty sloppy. I can try. I probably could make it look better. I'll definitely try to make it look better. There is a thing called a reorderable list that looks a little bit prettier than this. I might do that. I didn't do it because this way was simpler and I just wanted to get it working. So when this is like 100% done, which it should be by next week, I will throw the reorderable list in there. You'll see what I mean. It looks really fancy. It's really nice. So anyways, that is all. I'm done talking. Just give me your feedback if you have any issues, and I will be packaging this up and giving it to you guys very soon as I'm done with the AI. Throw it in there. Alright? Good luck, guys.